Hello, my friends. I hope you had a fantastic day, evening, or night, wherever you are. This week, I wanted to share an interview I did about a month ago with George. And now, George helps people change their mindset around their retirement, but also there's a lot of takeaways and value I feel that you can gain from this interview if you're not anywhere near retirement age, because I think there's a kind of misconception or this illusion around what retirement is, and that's kind of what we break apart in this episode. So I'll hand over to past myself. Thank you so much for coming back. I'll see you in just a moment, and enjoy the interview.
Hello, Cotton. I'm George Jerjian, and I am a mindset mentor and author and speaker, and I help retirees find a new beginning.
Thank you so much for the time, George. And, I really find it interesting because we just had a little bit of a conversation about your story, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask you to say it again now we're on the record. But I think it's great because I think there's this, and I wanted to start actually, because I know I approached you a little bit, but I want to actually go the other way around. I think there's this misconception, especially people my age who are closer to my age, who think that the retirement is this golden kind of opportunity of like, yes, I've worked my whole life, I get to do it, and I get to be on a holiday all the time. But what I've always thought about it is like, what am I going to actually spend that time doing, right? It's nice for maybe a week, maybe a month, maybe 6 months at most, right? But do you get bored, right? Like, you must get bored. Surely you've got to get bored, right?
If it was only boredom, that would be acceptable. It's actually much worse than that. I think the trouble with retirement is that the first 12 to 18 months is a honeymoon period, which is great because that's like all the things you thought you'd be doing. You start to do stuff like that. But then after the 12 to 18 months window, it gets really, really boring. Now, I know some in your audience might say, I'm having a fantastic time in retirement. Well, I would say to you, there comes a point where that fantastic time stops because we, as humans, our mindset is such that we might think our conscious mind takes a nap while it's sleeping, but our subconscious mind is working 24/7 from our date of birth to our date of death. It does not stop. And if we're not engaged in socially and mentally engaged in doing something for others, our mind will start to create problems to solve. So if you notice with older people, they're always worried about their health. Well, guess why? They've got so much time to worry about their health now, right? If they were busy doing something that they enjoyed doing, right? Let's just park the money aside for a moment, right? This isn't about money, right? The money equation I'll talk to you because that's a disastrous place anyway, but it's not about the money. It's being about mentally and socially engaged. And if you're mentally and socially engaged, you're living life, you're having a good time, right? So what I tell retirees, and this applies to younger people too, so I'm going to come to that in a second. Let me just address the retirees. My recommendation to retirees is that when you retire, go for a gap year. Just as you would have done, when you're an adolescent, you're moving to the workforce. It opens your mind. Travel opens your mind. And I have special exercises that I would ask you to do when you're in your gap year. Look for things like, what do you spend? What activity do you lose all sense of time in? That tells you that you love what you're doing. And maybe that's the area that you should be looking at to find the activity you want to do. So now take a step back. For your younger audience, I would say, don't wait for retirement to live your life. A, you may never reach it. And B, it's highly likely that you will reach it. It's a hellhole. So if you want to live life to the full, start living now, in the present moment. If you're working in a job you hate, with the anticipation that when you retire, you'll be able to do what you want, it's delusional.
Yeah, and I think it's this kind of principle around we've had a societal culture that's been designed around we live to this date, We are then going to grow, and then we're going to have a career, we're going to work hard, we're going to pay into the system, and then the system will pay us to basically live for 20 years, right? 10 years maybe, right? And that's where the kind of like retirement concept comes from.
Right.
But it kind of is this illusion if you have to, I'll use the term, eat shit for a long time before you're allowed to enjoy life, right? Which seems a bit backwards, right? I mean, I was very fortunate, and one of the main things that I've had going for me for a very young age is I've known what I've loved to do since 12, right? Great, fantastic. But I'm fully aware that's not the normal, right? I know that's not reality. So the reason why I asked this next question is like, how does someone, because I'm quoting the book behind you, right? Which is Dare to Quote Your Purpose or Discover Your Purpose, right? It could be either. But how does someone discover their purpose, right? I think is a really interesting and really important question, because I got lucky. Let's make that very clear. I won the lottery in regards to timing, and I won the lottery in regards to finding that I wanted to work for myself at age 8, and then finding which industry I wanted to work in by age 12. That doesn't normally happen.
No, it doesn't. You're absolutely right, Carlton. It doesn't happen. That didn't happen to me either. In fact, if I had known what I know now, I would have done things very, very differently after leaving school, or even before leaving school. However, I have no regrets. My journey was my journey. Even the good days and the bad days, that's the way that river went for me. But for young people, I'd say, look, don't work at a job you hate because of the money. That is such a cliche, but it's so true. A lot of us work because of what other people might think about us. They'll think highly of us if I'm in banking, or I'm a lawyer.
Oh, did you know I'm the managing director of X company that you've never heard of?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a startup. But if you're in that startup and you hate what you're doing, get out, because you're not guaranteed to live another day. And what you don't want to be doing is living an unhappy life. You're mortgaging your present for a future that may never come. So the book title is DARE. DARE is an acronym for Discover, Assimilate, Rewire, Expand, right? Because it's a mindset thing. But what I want to share with you is the actual word dare. It's about courage. We're all programmed to think, right? So we're always thinking. What we don't do is listen to our heart. And courage is not something that you can intellectualize, right? Courage takes balls, right? And balls does not reside up here. It resides in your heart. Yeah, taking a risk, right? And you can't play it safe, because there is no such thing as playing it safe, right? You can cross the road and be hit by a car and it's over, right? There's no guarantees that any of us on this platform today are going to make it to the end of the day. So you have to take each moment as though it's your last, right? The Benedictine monks for 1,500 years always had this concept of keep death top of mind, right? It's not because they were morbid. It's because if you recognize that life is actually very fragile, right? We're very robust, but we're also fragile. We might not make it to the end of the day. So if you know that life is fragile, you try to maximize the joy that you get in life on a daily or hourly basis. So I would say dare, courage. In fact, the word courage comes from the Latin cor, meaning heart, right? Courage doesn't reside in the brain, it resides in the heart. So you need to use your heart. What is it you love to do?
I think it's a really important point, right? Because something that I've noticed as I've really started to pursue like what I want to do at Brunton Media, and now what I've done with the second business, etc., has been this concept of like when you achieve the goal is actually not when you're the happiest. You're actually the happiest or the most content when you're pursuing the goal, right? Doing the thing where you're, I guess from a psychology point of view, it's actually when you're expanding your comfort zone, expanding what's possible, expanding what you can see as capability, right? Because I'm in a very fortunate position where it feels like I've broken the algorithm. E.g., I've found something that works really, really well, and we're pulling very, very good numbers, right? And the thing is, that's causing me now an interesting new problem, which is, right, okay, good work demand, great, fantastic. It's only me at the moment, still, the majority of the business, and I can't sustain that now because the work demand is gonna outweigh that. So I'm now into a role which I've been like trying to get to for a while, which is managing director, playing the chessboard kind of style for a long time. But I'm now like, right, this is where you have to take that modality of like, yes, you're serious at management. Yes, you're serious at running a company. Okay, now let's test it, right? Where it can't go wrong, right, as well, which is the fun bit. But I think before we get too far into mindset, because it's something that I'm sure both of us could discuss literally for hours, how did you get here, right? Obviously you were born, obviously you did all that, but like, what was your real story that really sent you on this path?
That's a really good question, Carlton. January 2007, I was diagnosed with a bone tumor, and the oncologist told me bone tumors are in 98%, that's 98% of cases, secondary cancer, which means cancer's spread through your body and there's nothing we can do. And he said, you're probably looking at 6 months of life. Now that is a bomb, right? That drops on your lap. It's not something you hear every day. And
It's not great. It's not great. Not a great day at the office. Let's be honest.
It's not great. And in a way, I was kind of like in a state of shock, and then you kind of go into denial and all that stuff. But so for 3 weeks, I was undergoing tests and stuff. And 3 weeks in, the oncologist calls me in and tells me he's got good news and bad news. Good news is that I belong to the 2% club. Whoopee.
Yes.
And however, the bad news is that the bone tumor is the size of an eggplant sitting on my pelvis, which needs 2 operations. And I might have to learn to walk again because whatever it was. Anyway, long story short, I convalesced for 6 months, did a course online on philosophy. As you do when you're in that state of mind, because you're thinking, what's life about?
What's going on? What's going on? How did I get here? Yeah.
Yeah. And the for me, the real sort of trigger was a lot of the stuff I've been pursuing was a complete waste of time. It's not really what I wanted, but I thought it was important. And, and it's just, I wasn't thinking. And I think most of us don't think. We're kind of like on automatic pilot. A lot of us get up in the morning, we brush our teeth, we go to work, we do this, we do that, come back home, sleep, and next day, same thing again, same thing. We don't really think. And ultimately, I think crises are really, really good for us. That we don't like it when it's happening to us, but they're really, really good for us because they push us, they shove us into a place where we are forced to grow, we're forced to change. And I would not go back to who I was. I would not be interested to go back to who I was. That persona, and persona, by the way, another word is from a Greek word, which means a mask. We're all wearing masks, right? I mean, some of us have 30 masks, right? So here's the point. You need to find your authentic self, which is what I did. I found my authentic self. And let me tell you, it was not an easy road because, for many of us who, when you reach a certain age, you kind of think like, it all, right? There's nothing more to learn. Huge mistake. And it's actually a horrible place to be because there's no joy. The joy comes in a new beginning, when you start something new, when there are risks taken, when there's a chance of failure, and it's okay to fail. And then you don't attach your ego to the failure. You kind of move through the failures as you move forward. And you need humility. I didn't have a lot of that. So I had to learn about humility. but it's a wonderful place to be, because also when you kind of get to my age, what other people think is not really that important. But when
No,
you're younger, it is, isn't it?
I think it can be, right? I
Can
think
be, yeah.
I'm, I hate saying I'm very grateful and I'm very lucky and I'm very 1%y, right? I hate saying that, but I am, right? Because I was brought up with the right set of values that said, from a very young age, for as long as I can remember, my mum has always said to me, if you don't fully love yourself, you cannot love someone else at all, in any capacity. Whenever I say that, people think it's romantic. It's not always romantic.
Yeah.
It's anything about anyone, right? If you don't fully own and commit to who you are personally and within yourself and love yourself fully, you can't give, right? You can't share, you can't be grateful, you can't be any of these things, because you're not coming from a full cup of emotional joy, right? And emotional gratefulness and emotional, and etc. And it's a mindset I've had, and I can only say it's from my mum, because that's the only way I can think about it, that where it's come from. But it's this concept of like, I'm eternally grateful for everything I have ever, and it's arguably why I know I'm going to be really successful, because I try and stay as humble as I can all the time. Because something that I've seen in my very short time as a business owner is people have their ego go too far to their head, and then they go, oh, I'm too big to fail, make 2 wrong mistakes, bang, you're out of business, right? And the reason I mention it here is because we're in a position right now economically, which those in my circles, those close to me, will know I've been discussing for 2 years, right? Guys, you can't print money that's free for 2 years. I'm not here to get into the political debate about it. That's not where that's the point of this conversation. It is the reality we find ourselves in, right? Whether it's because of the Ukrainian war, whether it's because of COVID, whether it's because of Brexit, whether it's because of all these things, fine, right? There's probably no reality. It's probably a combination of all the above. Actually, that's not important information, right? Because that doesn't change where we are, right? What changes where we are is business owners, I'm going to say hopefully like us both, right? I can speak only personally with conviction, is that we can continue to ride this storm, we can continue to create growth in our local economies, which eventually will outlast the contraction that's currently happening in the economy. But for those who are listening who maybe don't have the experience and the kind of, the best asset for me was the hunger for growth, the hunger for development, the hunger for, there is no such thing as I'm going to get killed by this crises, right? What would you, in your experience, suggest people start trying to either develop mindset-wise, or they try to look for when they're trying to be like, yes, this is difficult, but I need a bit more oomph, I need a bit more, you know what I mean, like to get through it, because I think it's very privileged of me to say, because I've lived in a high level of, being grateful for everything I have for a very long time, because I've won the lottery with the values I was brought up with, right?
Well, first of all, Carlton, thank you for sharing that, because I think what you said is absolutely true. I think the vast majority of us don't love ourselves. We've not been brought up to love ourselves. That old Christian dictum of love your neighbor as yourself is an equation. It's not saying you have to love your neighbor. It's saying you have to love your neighbor as yourself. And if you don't love yourself, how can you love your neighbor?
Yeah.
Right. That's the first thing. So kudos to your mother for teaching you that. That's totally true. And talk about gratitude. I studied a guy called Martin Heidegger, a philosopher, a German philosopher, who talked about thankfulness. He said thankfulness is the pathway into thinking. Because if you're not grateful for what you have, doesn't matter what you struggle and fight and work and try to achieve, whatever you achieve, once you get it, it's like, what's next? Because you're not in that state of gratitude, right? Gratitude is a mindset that's linked to thinking. And he said it wasn't just neurological, it was also linguistic. The word think and thank come from the same Proto-German word thank, that's T-H-A-N-C. So it's just interesting how linguistically and neurologically being grateful and thinking are connected. Moving forward to what your question about, crises and challenges. Before this book, I wrote a book called Spirit of Gratitude. Crises are opportunities. And the reason is because when we're in a crisis, nobody likes a crisis, right? But we think crisis is a big, bad thing. But the real interpretation of the word crisis is a turning point. So that's all it is. It's just a turning point, right? And in a sense, I kind of, on my 30-day silent retreat in North Wales, what I discovered was that every single crisis in my life opened me up to new opportunities. So the crisis you have today, recession, difficulties and challenges, they're actually life knocking on your door and saying, wake up, look for the silver lining here, right? And you can't go wrong if you go about looking for what you love to do and who you want to serve, right? So whether you're sort of a janitor or a singer-songwriter or whatever line of work you're in, if you love what you do, you cannot fail. But you've got to have the courage to come out of where you are, in which you're unhappy, and move towards something that you love to do. And is it going to take time? Yes. Are you going to struggle? Yes. But it's all okay, right? Just get over the ego hurdle, because the ego is going to say to you, no, you can't do that. That's beneath you. No, you can't do that. Stay where you are. There's a semblance of self-esteem here, being a bank clerk or whatever it might be. No, go for what you love.
And I really agree with that. And I think it's something which, I've discussed with many people, which is like, understand that my vision and your vision are going to be different, right? My vision for a very long time was build an empire, be one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world, build this massive beast, etc., right? That comes with a lot of caveats. That comes with a lot of stress. That comes with a lot of things, but I thrive on it, right? That's my fire. That's my fire in my heart. That's fire. Like people are like, you watch Burnout, watch this, take weekends off, maybe take a day off, etc. I'm like, I get where they're coming from, and I respect the fact they're coming from a place of care. And there will be opportunities where I will do so. However, I understand that I'm in a build stage right now.